But we're now at Daf Tzadi Zayin Amid Beis. Hilkach. Rava finally makes some order out of this confusion. Min b'sheino mino dehet Torah. If let's say you have two minim of hetera, but they have they belong to two different species, and therefore they have two different tastes. And we have to assume that we have a Jew who's allowed to eat that mixture, like, for example, the Kohen in the case of Truma. And if it's min b'sheino mino, let's say, the Truma is yayin, and the heter is shemen, or vice versa, and they got mixed up together. Or, for example, let's say you had bread of Chullin that was cooked in the same pot as bread of Truma. Give it to a Kohen, let him taste it. Ah, no, that's min b'mino. Sorry. Let's say you had barley bread that was Truma that got mixed into wheat bread. Again, don't hold me on this. I'm not sure if barley and wheat have two different tastes. So you have to figure that out. Or let's say you have a bread of chulin that got cooked in wine of truma. So certainly that's min b'sheino mino, and you want to know whether the taste of the truma wine is felt in the bread, and you give the bread over to a kohen. That's what we call min b'sheino mino dehetera. For the kohen, it's all mutter, and that's called te'ima, te'ima v'yisrael. B'taima, and he'll tell you whether or not there's a taste of the truma wine in the bread. The isura, but now we have a mixture of isur that fell into heter. Like, for example, the case that we had, Rabbi Yochanan's case, where they cooked non-kosher fish with kosher meat. B'kfela. Here, you can't give it to a Jew to ask him if he tastes the taste of the fish in the meat, because he'll be eating isur. So we have to give it to a non-Jewish chef. And min b'mino delekala mekama. What about a case where it's all the same min? Let's say, for example, yayin shel truma got mixed up with yayin shel chulin. It's yayin b'yayin, it's min b'mino. Delekala mekama. You can't tell me whether you taste the wine of truma or the wine of chulin, because they taste identically the same. Or for another scenario, inami min b'she'eno mino de isura v'leka kfela. What about a mixture of non-kosher fish with kosher meat, which is min b'she'eno mino, but it's isura? And leka kfela. I mean, the only possibility would be to have a chef who's not Jewish taste it, but there's no one available. And then b'shisha. That's where we apply the third rule, and we only could permit the meat if we calculate whether the ratio between the non-kosher fish and the kosher meat is 1 to 60. Now, exactly how you figure out the ratio is a little bit complicated. You could use a method called displacement, which means that you take that volume of isur and you throw it into water and see how much water gets displaced. And then you do the same for the heter. But as we'll soon see, it becomes very complicated in the case of a pot because you don't know what the maximum blia absorption into the pot is. All right, anyway, Hanu Atmahasa. So the word Atmahasa is an Aramaic word for the thigh, the yerech. The imlichu, okay, so now we get into another two principles in Tarovis. One is called Moliach Hareu Kiroseach, that salting is like, even though the temperature is cold or lukewarm or warm temperature, nevertheless, it's like it's heated up. And then we have another principle called Kavush Hareu Kimavushal. When you soak something in a liquid for, let's say, 24 hours, then also there's an absorption of the tam, even though everything's cold. Dimlichu bereish galusa begida nashya. So in the house of the Reish Galusa, they did salting together with Gira Noshe. So you have these thighs that were salted together with the Gira Noshe. And here we have Machlokas, Ravina Osar and Rav Acha bar Rav Ashi Shori. Ravina says, Moliach Hareu Kiroseach, and therefore the tam of the Gira Noshe spreads throughout the meat, the thigh. And Rav Acha says, no. I'm not going to say that Moliach is Kiroseach and therefore it permeates throughout the entire meat. Because Ravina, on the one hand, says that when you have salting, that spreads the tam throughout the entire whatever it is, the piece, let's say the yerech. But Rav Acha, on the other hand, says that salt doesn't have that effect. Rav Acha asu shayla marbar Ravashi. Okay, so before we were talking about Rav Acha bar Ravashi, now we're talking about marbar Ravashi. And the case came to him, and Amalei, he's going to tell us what Rav Ashi would paskin in this case. Amalahu, he says to them, Abba Shari. In other words, my father Rav Ashi would permit eating the thigh. Now, I'm not sure what that means. Do you have to take off at least Kedei Klipa at the point in which there was contact between the Gida Nosha and the thigh? But basically, there's no need for Shishim. And that supports the opinion of Rav Acha bar Rav Ashi, that it's mut. So now we have the sheet of Ravina that it's also. Omole Rav Acha, who is matir. Ravini says to Ravina, my daitcha, why do you think it's also? The Omar Shmuel, Moliach Hareu Kirosea. And kavush hareu kimavushal, as we described before. So you think that the tam of the Gida Noshe now penetrates throughout the entire yerech based on the principle moliach hareu kiroseh, because it was salted together. Ha'amar Shmuel, but Shmuel himself, in the context of our Mishnah, with regard to Gida Noshe that was cooked, and the Mishnah requires shishim because the tam of the Gida Noshe spreads throughout the entire yerech. Lo shanu, says Shmuel, elam ben isbashal ba, vol nitzla ba kole fi ochad ad shemagil lagid. So it means that salting, although it's kiroseach, but yet it has the same status as roasting. We don't say that moliach hareu kimavushal, but rather moliach hareu kiroseach, which means like, heat, dry heat without any liquid, and therefore it has the status of tzli. And Shmuel himself said, with regard to tzli, that all you need is kedei klipa. You just have to remove the peel off that part. So how then can you tell me that based on Shmuel's Moliach Harei Kiroseach, in the case where he salted the thighs together with the Gid Anosher, it should be also. It's only Roseach, which means it's only Tzli. It doesn't have the status of Bishul. And Shmuel's on record as saying that if it only has the status of Tzli, then all you need is Kedei Klipa. So how are you going to tell me that the whole Yerech is also because of the salting together with the Gdi? It's only Tzli. V'chi are you going to answer my kiroseach dika omar roseach kibavushal? No. When Shmuel said that moliach harei kiroseach, he didn't mean that it's like resicha of tzli. He meant it's like resicha of mevushal, of cooking. In other words, when you have heat, you want to know whether the heat is compared to heating something in a liquid, which is called bishul, and cooking, or it's heating of tzli, of roasting. So maybe when Shmuel used the term moliach hareu kiroseach, and he said it was roseach, means like it's like heated up, it's like boiling hot. He meant it's like cooking, and if it's like cooking, then if you cook through this salting process to get a nosha together with the erech, then you have to aser it b'nesinas tam shishim, which is exactly Ravina's psah. So Gemara says no, that possibility has to be rejected. Why? Right? Shmuel made two statements and he formulated two principles. One is roseach, one is that moliach hareu kiroseach, and the other is that kavush, when they soak together, is kimavushal. From the fact that he said by kavush mavushal, and in the case of tzli of moliach, he said it's kiroseach. He didn't say it's kimavushal. That contrast itself tells you that kiroseach doesn't mean kimavushal, and therefore it has the status of tzli. So how can you tell me that it's also b'nosein tam kasha? The Gemara leaves it as an outstanding kasha. All right. Omer of Chanina, Shemeshar. Now we get down to the nitty gritties. We dip our feet into the mud here, and we have to figure out how do you determine whether shishim 1 to 60, what the ratio is between the Isser and the Heter. Says Rav Chanina, Mesharin berotev ubekefa. I know this is kipa, but he has it punctuated as kepa or kefe ubechatichos ubakidera. So let's understand. A non-kosher piece of meat fell into a pot. That's cooking. What's inside the pot? There's kosher meat. There's soup. There are sediments. And there are slices of meat. It's a whole chullin. All that I could understand. We could begin to calculate the volume of all the heter that's in this pot, including the meat and the slices and the soup and the sediments and everything else. But what's b'kedera? You want to add to the calculation of heter the walls of the kedera. And here we have two pshatim, a machlokes. What does it mean b'kedera? According to one transmission, one opinion, b'kedera atzma. We actually consider the volume of the walls of the pot. We have to focus not on the walls of the kedera that have a sizable volume, but rather on the blia that went into the kedera. So, for example, if in the last 24 hours you cooked in this pot 1 pound of meat, then that's the maximum blia in the walls of the kedera. And this last shita of b'mai debala kedera is lechumra, meaning we cannot calculate the entire kedera. We can only calculate that part of the kedera that was bolea, meaning we're going to use the volume of the meat that was cooked in the pot, assume that the maximum volume of that meat was the maximum absorption of the walls of the pot, And that we can add now to the calculation together with the pieces of kosher meat and the soup and the sediments and the sliced meat and so forth and so on to see if we have shisha. Om Rabbi Abba, Om Rabbi Yochanan, Kol Isurim Shebetorah Misharinan Keilu Heim Batzal V'Kaflut. Kaflot. Onions or leek. What does this mean? So as we mentioned yesterday, there's halach l'Moshe Sinai that when we calculate the sharinon, the time of shishim, we imagine that the isur that fell into the pot of heter was a leek or an onion. And if a leek or an onion of that volume of the non-kosher meat fell into a pot, would the leek or the onion give off taste to the pot? Amalei Rabbi Abaye u'sharina b'pilpul v'tavlin da'afilu bi'elef lo b'telim. I don't get it, says Abaye. Says Rabbi Abba to Abaye. Why are you choosing to represent the Isur with onions or leek? Why don't you represent the Isur with pepper and spices, which surely would permeate the taste? That's what a spice is all about. And then if you came to that conclusion, then afilu bi'elef lo b'telim, even if the ratio was 1 to 1,000, but pepper or spices, no matter how minuscule a volume they are, would give a taste that permeates throughout the kedera. Amalei shiru chachamim she'ein nosein tav b'isurim yosem mibatzal v'kaflut. Amongst the various isurim that might have fallen into your kedera and the taste of the isur permeated throughout the kedera, contents of the kedera, there's nothing like the leek and the onion that have such a strong, profound taste that would permeate throughout the kedera. So while it's true that pepper and spices are stronger than onions or leek, there's no prohibited food on the face of the map, I mean, the Gemara is going to question this, that has a taste as strong as spices. The strongest taste of Isur, if you check out all the Isurim, would be equal to the onions or the leek. So if your situation is such that the onion in the amount, the volume of the prohibited substance would not impart a flavor to the permitted substance, then we're sure that there's no other Isur that would have a taste that would permeate throughout the heter. Omar of Nachman, Gidin b'shishin. Gid hanoshe has a tam. It's not like a piece of wood. And therefore, if the gid hanoshe was cooked in a pot of heter or with its yerech, then you need shishin. But the ain't gid min aminyan. I mean, that's pretty obvious. He's saying that you don't calculate the gid as part of the 60. I mean, the gid is the enemy. The gid is the isur. We're not going to calculate the isur together with the heter. Therefore, we require 60 besides the gid itself. I don't know exactly what the finish is. I mean, who would think otherwise? Okay, now we get to the famous sugya of kchal. Kchal is that part of a cow which on the one hand it's basar, but on the other hand it's absolutely saturated with milk. It's the udders of the cow. Chal b'shishim. So you have the udder of this cow that fell into a pot of kosher meat, and the chal will be batel b'shishim. If you have 60 kosher meat, keneged against the chal, which is non-kosher, of course the cow died without a proper shechita, then it's mutter. Uchal min haminyan. When you're calculating 60 of the heter, you can include the chal itself. Why is that? And the answer is because the chal is basar. And the only problem with the chal is that it's carrying the milk. So chal, as opposed to giranosha, is only a carrier. In and of itself, it's mutter. Giranosha is in and of itself also. Beitza b'shishim v'eina beitza min haminyan. So you have a non-kosher egg from a treifa animal that falls into 60 eggs that are kosher, and they were all cooked together in one pot, and it's batel b'shishim, but the beitza itself is inherently asur, and therefore cannot be calculated within the shishim. Only the chal, which is inherently meat that's mutter, that could be calculated. Even after you calculate that the chal is batel b'shishim, the chal itself, again, if you can identify it, is asur. It is so absorbed with milk that we consider it as a chefza shel basar b'chol. And the nafkamina is going to be not only whether you can eat the chal, if you can identify it, but also whether or not that chal will prohibit, will aser another pot. If, let's say, the chal falls into a second pot, the nafal k'dera cheres oser, because the Rabbanan gave the chal a status of basar b'chol. It's a chefza basar b'chol, and therefore, even though the tam cholav in the first kedera was batel, but nevertheless the chal itself is asur. It's like you can't get the absorbed milk in the udder to completely remove itself from the udder, and therefore the udder is a chefza of basar b'cholav. Now, if the udder falls into a second pot, you're going to need shishim against the udder. Rav Ashi, ki avina be Rav Kahana, was in the academy of Rav Kahana. Iboilahu, the question was raised: ki misharina b'di de misharin, o b'may denofak minei misharin. So again, we're talking about chal that fell into a pot of meat, and the chal is saturated with what? With milk. And now misharina, we have to calculate whether there's 60 in the meat against the chal. And now Rav Ashi vacillates about the following question. The chal, we said, was a chefza basar b'chol. So therefore, when I calculate shishim, I need shishim against the entire chal. Because the chal has now absorbed the milk in it. Or no? Should we say that the chal as meat is one entity, and the milk that's absorbed within the chal is another entity, and all I need in the pot of meat is shishim against the amount of milk that's in the chal? That's obviously a great kula. And the Gemara answers, Pshita dibdidei misharinon. How could you possibly calculate the amount of milk that's absorbed within the chal? To iba medinofak minei minoyadina. You can't give me halacha b'sharina that you calculate the shishim and then there's no way of doing that. It must be that we calculate against the entire chal, because that we can do. if you're telling me that we need shishim against the kchal, not against the milk that's absorbed in the kchal, but against the kchal itself, then if you have shishim in the first pot, you mevatel the kchal. If you mevatel the kchal, then it should become a cheftzeh de teira. If it falls into a second pot, it should be mutter. Let's go back to the original statement that the kchal itself remains asur, even though the shishim to be mevatel in the first kedera is shavur rabbanan kechaticha de nevela. The rabbanan gave it the status of nevela. It's through and through, durch and durch asur, and therefore you need shishim. Therefore, Rabbi Yitzchak said you have to get rid of the kchal, and therefore you're going to need shishim against the kchal. Beitza b'shishim vein beitza in a minyan, right? This is Rav Nachman, that the egg itself is batel b'shishim, but you can't calculate the egg as part of the shishim. Amalei Rav Idi bar Ovin la'Abaye l'meimer di Yehova tama. I don't get it. You're assuming that an egg gives off taste, and therefore you need shishim. Amri and she. We have a phrase that people use, ki maya de be'afi alma. It's as tasteless as egg water, meaning there's no taste in the egg. They don't impart any flavor to the food that was cooked. So why do you tell me that you need shishim against the egg if there's no nesinas tam? Amalei, now what are we talking about? Are we talking about a hatched egg, or are we talking about a full egg? Amalei, hachmai skidin, what's our case? Here we're going to start Daf Tzaddik Ches. The Beisas Efroach, we're talking about the chick inside the egg. In other words, there are two types of eggs. There are eggs that have a chick inside of them, and there are eggs that don't have a chick inside of them. Our case is a case of an egg that the chick forms inside the egg, and it's like meat. It's like a regular chicken. It has taste, and it imparts its taste. Basically, we treat it as a bird. Now, what happens if the mother bird is kosher? And the answer is, it needs shechita, but you can't shecht it. And therefore it's nevela. So the Gemara says, "Aval tmeo lo." Right? You're talking about an egg that contains a chick. Beitza sefra. What about a bird that gives birth to an egg that has no chick inside of it? If it has no chick inside, apparently, according to our presentation, Reb Nachman would concede that it doesn't impart taste. And even if the mother bird is a non-kosher bird, the egg does not impart taste because it's like water. Because it doesn't contain an unhatched chick. Esvei, but I'm going to ask you from a brisa, Beitzim tahoros shlokon im beitzim tmeos and yeshem benosim tam kulam asuros. You see that if you had a bird that's not kosher, and the egg of the non-kosher bird, which is also not kosher, fell into a mixture, and we see that it prohibits all the other eggs because it's benosim tam. So the Gemara answers, here too, we're talking in this brisa about a case of a bird that has an egg, and the egg contains an unhatched chick. Now the truth is, as we said before, if it's a beitza sefroch, it makes no difference whether the mother bird is kosher or not, because there's no shechita in the chick. So therefore the Gemara says, well, my correlates meya. And the answer is Keva de Isbeit Efra correlate Tmeya. Now, it's the bird itself is a kosher bird, but we call it Tmeya non-kosher bird because the chick is non-kosher. And I think this is where we'll stop for today on the top of Daf Tzadiches. Okay, then. So let's assume, that the same time tomorrow.